Welcome to Wild Contemplations with Kristin and Cori. We're so glad that you are here joining us today, and I'm excited to see what this conversation brings. So, my name is Kristin. I am a 1/3 emotional projector in human design, and my astrology is Sag Sun, Libra Moon, Pisces Rising. And this is my co-host, Cori. She's in Ohio, I'm in New York, and here we are creating this podcast for you. So, Cori, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, Kristin. My name is Cori. I am a Cancer Sun, a Virgo Moon, Virgo Rising, and a 4/6 sacral manifesting generator in human design. I realize I've been forgetting to say that on some of the episodes, so I will start with that. And yeah, I'm really glad to be here with all of you on this adventure with the sun and the earth around the astrological wheel through the gene keys, weaving human design and astrology and just our lived experience along the way. Last week, we were contemplating the sun in 53 and the earth in 54. We'll do a little check-in after we take a few breaths together. And then today we will be contemplating the sun in 62, the earth in 61. But before we get started, let's just land here together. Make yourself comfortable. Maybe soften your gaze or close your eyes. If it feels good to bring a hand to the body, and we'll just take 3 breaths together here. All right. So I'll just go over the frequency bands from last week, and I'll probably include this week too. We've just moved into these new keys, but we did have a new moon early this morning, and so I'm sure they'll be a part of our little check-in here. 53 with the frequency bands of immaturity, expansion, and superabundance. And then we had the earth in 54 with the frequency bands of greed, aspiration, and ascension. And now we have the sun in 62 with the frequency bands of intellect, precision, and impeccability. And we have the earth in 61 with the frequency bands of psychosis, inspiration, and sanctity. So yeah, let's see what's been going on.
First, I want to say in the 3 breaths, today I brought intention with them. So, normally my intention is just to be with the breath. And today, what came through was in the first breath, I release all that I am not. I call in all that I am and I land here. Those are my 3 breaths. And I thought that was pretty cool. So I thought I would share that.
I love that.
Um, so this past week, I feel like I've been really attuning to who I want to be and knowing that I'm putting forth the best version of me. So we talked a little last week, with the 53 and 54. about like here's life. Now how are you going to respond to it? Right? And I definitely feel like life is happening all around me. And I'm really just noticing how I want to be responding to it. And if I like the way I'm responding to certain things and how I want to shift the things that maybe I'm not so happy about. And really, again, just come back to my natural attunement, if you will, like the truth of me, coming back to that version. And so I've really been spending a lot of time there. And also I've noticed that my tolerance level has not been very high in the last week. Like I've been very, I guess my truth and what I see is very clear to me. And I I haven't been tolerant of anything really outside of that, is how I'll say that. So that's also been interesting to navigate and be with. I just got my cycle yesterday. So some of that moodiness, maybe even, if you will, could be coming with that as well. That cycle, that part of the cycle. But yeah, that's a little bit about how I'm feeling. How about you?
Thank you for sharing and asking me. Um, yeah, I wasn't really thinking about it, but when you just shared about, yeah, maybe having a bit of intolerance for like what's outside of like your conviction and truth, I can see that that has been coming up for me a bit. Um, I certainly feel like last week I could feel the shift in energy. I could feel that we're being called into a new cycle, and to shift some things and to get clear on like the intention beneath that. Kind of like it feels a bit like planting some seeds and things. Um, and also, I've had this invitation to just observe more, like rather than needing to like do something right away, like can I just take a beat, a pause, like we were talking about, and like check in with everything first before I just get going. But I do see this pull, um, yeah, happening in my inner world where it's like, okay, like, I know how I'm feeling and I know my truth and I know what I'm ready to move forward with. And it's not that I need anyone else to be that same way, but there is a level of like, yeah, if I'm going to be living this life, the people that are living it with me, like how are we gonna make this work if we are having these different truths, I guess. And yeah, just seeing like I think where before I might have uh bent a little bit more or like changed myself to kind of make it so that there wasn't as much um tension or but now I'm like there's some things that I just feel pretty certain of. Um and so yeah, how do I create the boundary there that allows me to still express and live that while also living with and amongst others in the world at large. Um, so yeah, this is one of the cool things I think about doing this check-in and sharing what's coming up because sometimes we don't even realize like what's happening until we hear someone else kind of put words to it. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Interestingly, I was listening to a podcast yesterday from Lewis Howell, and he said he's got John he this guy has three names and I'm forgetting one of them, but his it's John Bishop, like whatever. He wrote like Unfuck Yourself or Unfuck Your Life or something. I don't know. He's like a Irish guy, I think. Anyways, I saw him live once at a Tony Robbins event. He was great. Anyways, they're on this podcast and talking about relationships. And Lewis had said that when he came into his partnership, he told her that he would never do anything in service to her. And I thought that that was very bold, but also amazing and something we were talking about a couple episodes back too around like being in service to ourselves in relationship and what that means, whether that's romantic partnership or a business partnership or a friendship, whatever that is, right? But that we're always looking through that lens of what is in my highest alignment, and trusting that if that, like in relationship, if that doesn't mesh with another, then that alignment is not there, right? And that um we get to just stand firm in that version of ourselves. And I think that's also a line that I'm personally walking in my relationships is where where am I like standing in my truth, and where is there opportunity for me to open up to um like healing through relationship. There's a line there. Um and I feel right now that there's a lot of uncertainty in a lot of things in my life in terms of what is the next year gonna even unfold. Um but I still continue to stay very present in the now. And I'm just creating like crazy right now. I just had a meeting yesterday too, with a new collaboration that I'm doing with a local woman, and we're building something pretty big. And, and I'm committed to it and rolling with it, and still not knowing like where are things going to be a year from now. But I know that it'll all unfold in the way that it was meant. And all I can do is show up and be fully present and have both feet in the now. That's where I am. I guess a little bit more of a check in there.
I
Bouncing
love
off of
it.
yours.
Yeah, I love it because there is yeah, the I also feel um over this past week like again I have these things that I know are unfolding and are starting to like shift and move in a certain direction maybe, but I also feel like I'm good being right here right now too. Um and yeah, just I guess a lot of what's been coming up is like sitting with like paradox and um I guess this comes up a lot for me, but just yeah, letting it like all of it be there and seemingly, you know, contradictory things be there as well. And to know that again, um it we don't need to have it all figured out and it can all exist at the same time and unfold, like you said, from the here and now. And that's the most authentic thing, I think, is when it's unfurling in present time and in the moment. And it really connects to the keys that we'll be pondering today. Um, the sun in 62 with the frequency bands of intellect, precision, and impeccability. In human design, this is the gate of details, and it lives in the throat center and reaches towards the ajna. And actually, Neptune is activating that gate, that particular gate in the ajna, the 17. We have contemplated it already because it's in Aries. So this these two gates create a channel called the channel of acceptance from the ajna to the throat. So it is about bringing thoughts and ideas and concepts into verbal form, into expression, and into actual form, like into the world. Um, in the I Ching, this translates to preponderance of the small. And then we have the Earth in 61 with the frequency bands of psychosis, inspiration, and sanctity. In human design, it's the gate of mystery, and it lives in the head center and reaches towards the ajna. So we have both of these gates reaching toward the ajna. In the I Ching, it translates to inner truth. And there was something that I wanted to say. Oh, and this new moon we just had this morning is in the 62 as well. Um, so we really have an emphasis on, yeah, the throat again. If you remember in Gemini season, we were like almost the whole entire season, we were in the throat, kind of like having that throat activation, the end of Taurus season into Gemini season. Then at the solstice, we went to the identity center for a transit, and then for those 3 transits in the root. So we might have felt even like a release of a little bit of pressure in the last couple of days as the sun moved into the throat, and we'll be here for a few transits now. And so it feels like it's like coming back around again to kind of bring things yeah, out into the world, and the creativity that you speak to is a big theme with these two. Um, Especially the 61, but also the 62 in terms of like taking what's up here and being able to put words to it. Just like I was saying at the beginning, like once you put words to something, I was like, oh, I'm kind of feeling that too. That's kind of what I feel like with the 62 is, yeah, this ability to take these concepts that are kind of like out here uh and wide and like mysterious even, and put words to them in a way that's like easy to understand. Um, but I'll stop there for a second and just see if anything's coming out for you.
Yeah. What is coming up for me is this spectrum of um like the intellect and creativity process. So or even understanding process. So one side of the spectrum being two minds jamming on ideas together, and then things are just sparking and flying and things get created very easily, right? Like there's just this flow, this alignment happening. And then this other side of the spectrum that's I don't understand, um I don't understand. I don't understand what you're saying, what your perspective is, what your idea is, what your thought is. And having these two, so it's like you have the minds in alignment and you have the minds on opposite ends, sort of thing. And how like how that so easily spirals, into this co-creation or separation, if you will. That's what's really coming through for me, as you share about the energies more and just how, again, like kind of weaving in last week, how will you approach this situation that is there, right? What do you do? Like, so when you're in a conversation and things are flowing and things are aligned and you're understanding each other, it's that understanding piece that I think gets in our way sometimes. Um, even when I'm just thinking, even back like when I was in corporate and we would be going through like building systems and reading the requirements of all them. And if there was ever a time where somebody was going through the requirements and I didn't understand what they were trying to do with a certain requirement, like my brain just stopped right there. And then they would continue talking, and I'm just still over here with like, what are they trying to do there? What does this mean? Right. And so it's that understanding, that need to understand sometimes, that I think puts us in this little box trap that stops us from hearing the other person, hearing the idea, um, honestly, even being open to understanding it, because I find that I'm so trapped in my own internal process then of trying to understand based on what I know, right? Well, that makes sense to me. That doesn't make sense to me, right? Instead of actually like having more openness there. And it's not like that all the time, right? Like if the flow is there and the alignment is there, then the understanding piece can just be a blip, right? Like what did you mean by that? And right, because the bigger energy is more aligned, but when you have something that comes up that you just flat, there's like a just a not understanding there. I think sometimes it can stop us in our tracks. Um And then I'm like, I keep looking at this like psychosis word too. Like, we just get kind of lost in this spiral of meaning making and storytelling and all the things, when we don't have that understanding. Because I don't know what is it about not understanding that closes me off. Do other people experience this? Do you experience this, Cori? Like, um, I'd be curious to hear from you guys on this, like if you ever experience this, or like what is it that kind of stops you from listening or even being open to the other person, that creates that clash, like that separation versus co-creation. Um, for me, understanding is what's coming through, but I imagine it can be other things as well.
As you're sharing, what I'm thinking of is like, yeah, when we're in those conversations, because the 62 is really connected to language, obviously, because it's like, in the throat, it's bringing that stuff down from the ajna and putting it into words. So there's a connection to language here. I think in the Gene Keys book, the chapter is like the language of light, even. Um, and I think, well, I just think language is fascinating in general, but um, even if we speak the same language, we can have different definitions for words or feelings about certain words. That's why kind of it's cool, I think, to contemplate these like key words like this, because we all have a different idea of what these words mean. And he even talks about how like a lot of people get confused when they see intellect as like a shadow word. And he said, it's a good example, and we've talked about this before with some of the other ones, that like the shadows aren't bad. They're
Mhm.
just part of our makeup, part of the spectrum, but they're just a small part of it. And I think that's what these two really touch on, um, is that, we're seeing things from our own perspective, from our own experiences, from, the limitations of our minds and of the yeah, just like our viewpoint, because we can never really know what it's like to be someone else. I mean, we can think about um, someone going through something and what would that feel like if we went through it, but we're still considering it from our unique, perspective. I'm sure at some point when we start to open up these other faculties that we will really be able to like merge with another and like experience it from their viewpoints. So it's not like I think it's impossible, but I just think the way in which we currently operate, it's really hard to do that, to let go of your own biases and step into someone else's experience. But anyways, so that's where I think sometimes we can get, yeah, like confused, lost in that ability to understand another based on a variety of things. And really, what I feel like this 62, I think that what's happening right now as we come closer to this 2027 and this shift, this mutation that will really kind of change the way that we communicate and process information and share information. And I think what it's like kind of connecting to is, um, yeah, having this understanding that is actually not even so much about the words that we use, but more about like the energy that's underneath them. And I think people kind of tune into that more and more now than anything. And I think that's maybe where some of the misunderstanding comes from too, because you can put polished words on something, but if the energy beneath it isn't really reflective of those words, you can feel that too. Um, and like with the psychosis, it's so interesting because he talks about how he's like, you know, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but I'm going to say that like we're all psychotic. And he explains it at a very like base level and saying that like we're, the definition of this psychosis is like moving away from like touch with reality, right? And what he says is that just again, the way that we've been conditioned, and this connects with the 62, uh, in our evolution at this point in time, is like we we aren't connected to what's really, happening. There's so much that we cannot see. There's so many levels and layers of reality. And you've kind of even talked about this before. We've had conversations about it before about, connecting with these planes and like how do we find a way to bring these together? But there's just so much of the world that is um, cut off from that experience, cut off from the mystery of life. And like the 62, what can happen sometimes is that we get so caught up in like facts or like the small details and like being right. The 17 that it connects with is like the frequency bands are opinion, farsightedness, and omniscience. So we can get so caught up in our own way of thinking and seeing the world and being right, that we don't see things for what they really are. And a lot of like wisdom systems talk about this. It's the Maya, it's the illusion. So I think that's kind of what he touches on in the 61 with the psychosis is like there's so much that when we are just kind of really in our minds and trying to understand the world and figure things out, that we just kind of can't possibly connect with all that's here. And so both of these, I think, really ask us to tune in at a deeper level, to our inner truth, to the mystery that lives within us, but also all around us. All right, I
Mm.
kind of went all over the place with that one.
I love it. I love it. I love it. What really stood out to me is that it stops us from seeing things as they really are or as what they are, however you said that. And what immediately came through for me was that it's not just one thing. So it's multiple things. And I think that like this is also where, those misunderstandings happen a lot, right? Like, well, you said this, but I felt this, and like, but I meant this, but I didn't feel that, or like whatever, whatever sort of happens, right? Or that's not how I view that thing, like, or that word. That's not what that word means to me, or whatever it is, right? And the reality is that there are multiple perspectives, right? That's why there's like in those moments where there's a misunderstanding, there's multiple pathways there. And I think again, I'm going to go back to the psychosis piece. Like that sort of happens when like we're trying to say there's only one,
Mhm.
right? There's only one possibility here. And what is that, right? Is it yours? Is it mine? Is it like, right? Um, and that's, I think, too, where it comes in where you said like this need to be right sometimes. Um, I find that for me personally, it's not so much as being right as like what's the truth. Like I'm very much like aligned with finding the truth side of it. Um, yeah, so I'm sort of like trying to deconstruct everything to find that line of truth there. But I think that's what creates a lot of the dissonance as we navigate the world amongst each other and try, when there's comparing, when there's conversation, when there's anything trying to take more than one viewpoint or perspective and try to make it one way instead of just allowing it to be everything. How do we just allow all the perspectives to be there and find peace in that? Even when some of the perspectives, some of the viewpoints, some of the feelings that are out there in the world, are projected, are with, underlying emotional healing that's asking to be had, that person may not ever move through, right? Um, and we can't expect a fully healed world either, right? Like that would be kind of boring anyways, I think. I mean, maybe not, like, 'cause we would just be like, where do we go now? Like, this is exciting. Um, but it brings nuance, it brings like perspective, it brings the full spectrum, right? It brings the light and the dark, and that gets to all be there. Um, so yeah, like how that's what comes up for me more and more. Again, like I talked a little bit earlier about walking that line, right? Of who I am and where I stand, and then who do I want to be in relation to another? And am I compromising here, or am I being too stubborn here and I'm supposed to open and do some healing, or am I standing in my truth and my conviction and no, this is like who I am, right? And trust that piece of it, right? And that applies everywhere I navigate. the world, through business, through connection with other people, in romantic, intimate relationships and friendships and all of the things. Um, yeah, like that's like the overarching contemplation that's coming through for me is that line. Um, yeah, like when do I know when I need to stand in my conviction? I can still stand in my conviction and hold space for another viewpoint, right? Yeah, that I can do. But also, how do you navigate that in relationship with the world when we're not meant to be here walking a path alone,
Mhm.
right? I understand me. I understand my conviction. I understand that, right? But I'm not here to be alone. So in some way, I have to figure out how do I navigate that with the world, um, and hold space for all the perspectives, for all the things, all the emotions, everything all the frequencies that are happening all around us. Um, yeah, and then how do I understand when I'm meant to weave in with that or stand back? I guess would be like the ultimate contemplation I'm trying to get to here. Is that related to these keys or is this just my own
Absolutely.
stuff?
No, I think it absolutely it's interesting because the more the conversation unfolds, I'm like, wow, yeah, this is so connected to these, right? And I think it is like what I hear coming through and like my experience that I'm kind of bringing into um my mind right now is like, yeah, maybe that's where it's getting a bit confusing because I'm trying to run it through my intellect rather than run it through like my being, my heart, the way it feels in my body, the all of the things, I think I consider those, but I think at least in my particular experience right now, like I'm trying to make sense of it in my head. And this is one of the things that he talks about with the mind and why the intellect is represented here at the shadow level. Because if we remember, the shadow is again just like a small view. It's just like just a small part of the energy that's kind of been cut off from seeing the rest of it. And he talks about how it's because the mind operates currently right now in a sense of duality. So it sees things as like this or that, right or wrong, good or bad. I have to decide between this and that, And that's where I think it puts us in a bit of a predicament or like yeah, something that we are kind of like bringing into the deeper contemplation because in the reason that I love contemplation so much is I think it kind of dissolves those boundaries of either or. And because it's bringing us into the fuller view and embrace of the energy that says, oh no, this, just like you were saying before, all of this gets to be here at the same time. I don't have to really choose. If anything, I think life actually might choose for me. Like, um, I don't have to choose for my mind at least, right? Because again, my mind is gonna weigh all of the things and try to figure out what's the best, but from this very dualistic perspective. And again, yeah, because what I'm thinking of in mine is like my personal, it's, like relationship and living with someone and, finding a way to meet these moments in life where one of us feels one way and one of us feels another. And it does feel very, you know, dualistic in a sense. But again, I think we can hold space for the fact that if this is called inner truth, then there's not just one truth, the truth is inside each of us and it will look different for each of us. And we're not really here to like interfere with that in another, but just understand our own very deeply. And I think the more that we understand our own very deeply, the more precise and impeccably we can kind of move through the world with allowing all of it to still be there. And maybe that relationship does shift and change. And like we were saying last week, you know, it could be the end of a cycle in terms of like going separate ways, but it could also be the end of a cycle in terms of like stepping into something incredibly new, still together. Um, that's just what's coming up for me at the moment, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just to like add to that and maybe just set a little different way even with, you said instead of like taking it through the mind and deciding, maybe I'm feeling like through my heart or what does it feel like in my body or intuitively. And what came through for me right away is or through like the universal lens. So what if, like you said, like the inner truth, we get to stay attuned to what is my truth? Who am I? And yes, I understand that. And that's my role. And as far as everyone else is concerned, what if I'm removed from that? Even though we work together, like, that we're not alone and we do have these relationships where we co-create things, but how someone else is experiencing something, feeling something, living something, feeling some, whatever, then that actually doesn't go through my lens. Like maybe I'm going to sit with that a little bit because what would that look like now if because now right, if, let me finish that thought before I move on, but what if I detached from how it feels to me, right? Because it's not really up to me, right? Um, what if I detached from that, right? It takes the personal edge off of it, the bias edge off of it, and now puts it through the universal lens, right? Um, like, oh, like I said a couple episodes ago or whatever, when I was talking about Ram Dass, when he was talking about being in the experience of someone else's emotions and being able to just see like, oh, you're like in the anger channel right now, like, um, that sucks. Like I've been there before and like and you get to just hold this like very neutral perspective that it's not being directed towards me, even if it is, right? And could easily feel that way. But what if everything that we perceived in interaction with another person was just taken through a universal lens instead of personally? Like, would that really allow us to maintain our whole being in the relationship while we co-create things together and then allow like that spectrum I was talking about earlier, like when we're in the flow and aligned and co-creating, allow that to happen, right? But in those moments of separation or misunderstanding, then we're not interrelating each other, but we're just understanding more. I don't know how else to say it, but like through more of a universal lens. Like this isn't like if I'm in a conversation with somebody and there's a misunderstanding, that um it's not necessarily to do with me. And so if I can detach from that, like what would those conversations look like?
Mm.
And would it make that line I was talking about a lot easier of like, when do I just hold my conviction and walk in my path? And when do I sort of weave with others? And I think, we weave with others, not just in spaces where we can co-create, but also, I mean, maybe if you think about healing, right? If I'm in a conversation, right? If I'm recording this podcast with Cori and Cori says something that triggers me and I can say like, wow, that really triggered me. Like what's coming up here? Like that's also a co-creation, if we're being real about it. So it's not all just like, oh, well, I can interact with people or weave with other people if it's fun and light and easy, but I can witness someone else's experience, perspective, feeling, projection, whatever. I can witness that. Notice what it brings up in me, take that away into my little inner truth journey, but also like hold space for theirs in that, again, in that universal lens. I'm going to keep coming back to.
Yeah, to me it speaks to this idea of surrender, um, that is very connected to this like Siddhic frequency. Again, like the Siddhic frequency is the full spectrum of energy, and it's there within each and every one of us. It exists um, all the time, but we often just don't have the full view of it or the full access to it, um, because we're not in that surrendered state that it kind of asks us to be in order to open up to all of it. And that is the invitation. It's just like we were kind of, I think we might have even ended on this note before, but you know, we are united. We are, all part of a greater whole. But we obviously have come here and incarnated in these bodies in what appears, especially to our mind, to be quite separate. There's obviously a reason for this, and we're here to kind of share that expression and unique perspective with the world, and to, like you said, have all of those experiences, not just have the ones where, like, yes, we're jamming, we've got all these ideas, we're going to make something happen, we're going to create something together, but also the times where it feels quite challenging um, and it is triggering and it brings up stuff for us, and we have to move through emotions and we have to move through pain and we have to move through misunderstanding. So it is this invitation for us to, yeah, open ourselves up to it and allow it to be what it is, and know that, again, the one side isn't better than this side, even if it seems like it is, that they're both there for a reason and for um like more of the process and experience than any end goal. And when we do kind of surrender that individual experience, the tightening to it, or like the feeling like very attached to it, I think when we do kind of surrender to that, I actually think we probably step more into our individuality in a way, but it is so connected to everything that it doesn't feel. I don't know that it's in these gene keys. It's in one of them. But he tells this story one time of like something like there was someone in the surrendered state. They're in these boats, and this man is like in another boat yelling and mad and angry, but the other person is so surrendered that they don't see that person even as separate from themselves. So to them, like that person isn't bothering them or doing anything wrong, because it's just a part of who they are expressing something. Like there's no, it's a little bit tricky for the mind to understand, but like I think it's a similar thing that you're touching on that is saying like, yeah, we can move to this place where it becomes less about like us against them. You know, I'm not, that's not exactly what it is, but I'm just giving this for an example part and more about like the whole, like from the universal lens that you spoke of, and that there's no difference. Like he's saying, even in a world like that, like some of the things that, you know, we would put people in jail for or punish people for, you wouldn't, because it wouldn't be one person's fault, you know, like it would be again an experience that the whole has chosen to go through that one person, but it's part of something much bigger. I know I kind of went a little
Hmm.
deeper there, but I think it's all connected.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I've the whole boat story too. It reminded me of like I've done psilocybin journeys like a handful of times, and I've experienced that when someone is having, you can tell like a very hard, like they're moving through some heavy things experience, right? And they're maybe quite noisy, and you just you I think in the everyday world it would be considered like, the person would probably be removed from the room and they would be a disruption, for example, right? Um but being in that experience, I it was just a part of the experience, and it didn't feel like, that they were necessarily like separate, or I needed to compartmentalize that or anything. I didn't need to do anything with it. It just got to be there. Like you were saying with the boat, and the guy screaming, like it just, yeah, somebody is just having their experience. Um, and yeah, I'm thinking about like where, like, so now when we get out, into the world, where does that stop? Like where do we create that separation, or why does that come up in us, right? So if I'm at Target, okay, and there's like a screaming child um in the aisle with me, right? And some days I'm like not bothered at all. And other days I like want to say something. Like I want to, right? I want to express something. So what is that? I'm just thinking like what is that in me? And what comes through is this like just an incapacity to hold, right? Like nervous system. Like I don't have the space in me to hold that frequency, or even to hold anything else, right? It could be something else. It could be somebody just coming up and asking me a lot of questions, or asking me like what I can't tell you how many times I've been in a store and somebody will come up to me and ask me like I work there. I
Mhm.
don't know. Like this happens to a lot of people, but it happens to me a lot. I must just look like I work in a store or something, or look friendly enough to come up to, but or like I know things. That's We'll go with that one. I know
Mhm.
this girl must know things. Um, but it could have been something as simple as that, right? Where I could have been mouthy responding back, like because I just didn't have the capacity in my nervous system to hold it, right? It doesn't have to be like a screaming child or a screaming human, or, somebody acting out, or like, having a temper tantrum at customer service because they're not getting what they want, or whatever the case, right? We run into these different scenarios all the time. And I think within me, if I can pinpoint it and it's something I'll pay attention to, because I have evidence of the spectrum, right? I have evidence of in cases where I can hold that neutrally, and then cases where I'm just over the edge with it. And the biggest thing that comes through for me on it right now is just nervous system regulation and capacity. So if I'm already overwhelmed and feeling some level of stress and not feeling like I've had enough time to like clear energy and or whatever, right? That's what gives me the patience, the understanding, the ability to hold without it affecting me. And then the other thing I'm thinking about too is that my protection practice uh, that I utilize, um, and from that perspective, it would just mean that perhaps I have a hole in my aura, or I have an energy leak, that I'm so not only do I not have the capacity, maybe I don't have the capacity, but also do I have a leak in my aura where I'm taking in energy that's not mine more easily. So I'm not attending to the health of my aura, if you will, or the stability, the alignment. I'm not sure what word I would use there, but the integrity of my aura. Um, because any of those holes, gaps, leaks that are there are for us to navigate and seal and understand, like what part of me is letting this in, which is again going back to that episode we talked about, like, and this relates to kind of the nervous system thing. Like if I was really in a space of my purest alignment and frequency, would I even need that protection? Because it would be so clear to me that that's just not mine, right? And so that goes back to this like pure frequency, but also like regulation, which I think is really important.
I'm also being really reminded of the Venus sequence and just our conversation today. And, it goes through, well, it really puts our relationships and our interactions with others and the world around us in the forefront. And it looks at it from this perspective of like, yeah, what are the triggers? What is coming up for me, and how can I, come in here and process it in this way? And it takes us through this cool sequencing that really goes back to like the developmental years. So like basically from the womb until the age of 21, we can actually look that a lot of our conditioning was laid down there, and a lot of the things that trigger us now and the relationships that we call into our world and like the challenges and with others can kind of be traced back to those years. And so I also see like when you're talking about the nervous system regulation, like having this relationship with the different parts of yourself and like the inner child, younger selves that kind of come online again when we are feeling a bit dysregulated, or even it can be as simple as like how you were saying, it can happen one time and feel fine, and it can happen another time and like be so like nails on a chalkboard. And that it can even be from like things like the tone, like this, sometimes it's not even what's being said, but it's like the tone of the voice, or just something little that like kind of reminds you of something that happened in those earlier years, but it's activating it obviously subconsciously, and then that those like protector parts are kind of coming out and feeling like they need to do something and be in charge. And so I think part of the nervous system regulation too, um, is like developing relationships with those parts of self, and communicating with them and like holding space for them, but also knowing, you know, I have a mentor that says about like, um, there's a time and a place for it. Like maybe right now isn't the time for that part to come online, but I can talk to you later or something. And I think that's a really cool perspective too. But that just came up as you were, yeah, sharing about that.
Yeah, 100%. It's definitely related to nervous system, like you said. Just those old subconscious triggers that are still there coming up to heal. Yeah. And that's the whole journey of awareness, right? Is being in those moments and reflecting, what is this? Is this bringing up is this triggering me? Is this, um, showing me that my nervous system is not regulated? Is this showing me that, oh, I didn't do my energy work today, and I need time and space to just come back to my own self. I'm overwhelmed by all the external energies, and I just need to come back to self. Um, that's where everything starts, right? Is awareness of those things. Um, so yeah, I love that in these conversations that I can see patterns of what kind of comes back up. And also even that, like, the topics that we're talking about, like there will be these periods of time where we talk about like a certain thing and then it'll shift. And sometimes I'll go back to things like, oh, well, if I was really in my divine alignment, would I really need to be protected from all of this? Or would I just experience the awareness of what I need to do now to come back into my alignment? And then everyone else is just a teacher,
Mm.
right? Like I love the repeated things that are sort of surfacing to remind me, and to pay attention to these sorts of things. And also that in these contemplations that, I don't run away with when I say I like that's the contemplation or that's what I want to contemplate. I don't run away with like a list of questions that I'm asking myself. I just kind of let it be in my aura. And then as I'm saying, we just see it naturally evolve in these conversations or these perspectives come up, right? Where I'm like, oh, what if I don't actually put anyone else through my fucking vessel and I just put them through the universal one? Oh, wouldn't that make my life a lot easier, Kristin? Yeah, it probably would. It's just, it's cool. It's cool to witness. So, um, again, thank you for the invitation to be a part of this journey and creating this with you. It means a lot to me.
Yeah, thanks for joining me. And I just want to say really quickly, I know we're probably wrapping up here, but just what you were describing about being, in the divine alignment, in the, pure energy, sacred vessel, that to me actually feels like we're touching on sanctity.
Mhm.
So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really cool how they all really do weave together, right? We're talking about a moment in time of the energy, right? And how we're experiencing it. And I think I've mentioned before how I can feel the bookends. I can feel like the prior keys, and then probably like the next ones we're going to contemplate and the ones that we're currently in. But also, again, we kind of go back to like this was a long time ago. We were mentioning this, and I can feel that energy coming up again. And it's really reinforcing um, to see the same patterns, to see the evolution, to have the little epiphanies that come through. It's really quite amazing. And I, you guys listening, if you're here um on this ride with us, like I I'd love to know if are you seeing similar patterns? Like what's coming through for you in this journey too? We love seeing the shares and
Yeah.
um, getting messages about what came through or how it feels to be in this conversation with us. So thank you for being here. Cori, do you have anything else you want to share to feel complete today?
I feel complete. Just want to say, yeah, thank you to you and to everybody listening for being here on this journey with together. It's really beautiful, and I'm
Yeah,
grateful.
yeah. I can't wait till we get to Sagittarius season.
I know. I'm excited for so much. And I think too, as time, probably like the second half of things, we'll be able to weave in some more things. Like it feels like this was, we're just kind of feeling in and like getting our groove. And now I think we'll be able to kind of like, yeah, go deeper and explore more. And it'll be kind of cool for the next four. Maybe what we'll do is also tune into the moon. So today we're tuning into the moon in 62, but we'll kind of go through a whole moon cycle together and see how
Mhm.
that colors the energy and kind of unfolds. Um, since we're meeting today on this new moon, that will be kind of fun too. So I'll make
Yeah,
myself a note to do that.
yeah. Why not? Why not? It's all so interrelated. So,
Yeah. And it's always in us. I mean, we've said it before, but like we're tuning into this, obviously when the sun's illuminating. So it's just, it's more visible. There's more energy there. It's like uh, easy for us to kind of tune into
mhm.
and grasp and things, but they're always all within us.
Mhm.
Um, and then obviously just the different luminaries and planets can activate them in different ways, but they're always a part of us.
Mm. Right on. All right, guys. Thanks again for being here. Thanks for your shares, for your comments, for your presence. And we'll see you next week.